Welcome back to the It's Too Easy podcast. I'm Zach. This is my brother Jake, and we're gonna try something out new this week. I actually started up an Instagram for this account, so if you're following along, like, comment, subscribe, DM me, follow the Instagram. It's at Lenny Lenny Locks underscore just Lenny Locks. You can also look up the It's Too Easy podcast, and it should come up on Instagram. Hit us up, and we'll get it to you. But I'll be posting some daily picks throughout the week for basketball, UFC, soccer, football. And even if we have picks on the show, we do film this in advance. So if we have a change of heart before a game starts and decide to cash out, we'll let you know those things on there as well. But to get the show started, we're going to talk about a little bit of college football. Jake, what kind of games do you have for us this week? What are we looking at?
Yeah, so deep slate for college football this week. First game's Oklahoma and Kansas. Kansas is at home in that game, getting 10.5 points. Oklahoma's obviously been putting up a lot of points, but I just like Kansas to cover the 10.5 at home. They've been a bit underrated. They played Texas pretty tough until the end, so I do like them to cover the 10.5 this week.
Yep, I'm definitely liking Kansas plus 10. Oklahoma is one of those teams where they almost lost to UCF last week. And if they get in a shootout, I think it favors Kansas to have a chance to win that game and upset being at home. I'm hoping Kansas covers. I do think Oklahoma is going to lose one of these final four games. If it's not this week, it could be honestly any week because sometimes they just don't show up. What do you got for us next?
Yeah, and then next is West Virginia and UCF. West Virginia has kind of had a tough last couple of weeks, but I do like them plus 10.5 here against UCF. That is buying a few points at minus 175. But yeah, they've been a pretty good defensive team, so as long as their offense can keep them in the game, I like them within 2 scores.
Yep, I'm right there with you. I like them as well. Yeah, not much else to say there. A couple games that I liked. I think one of them is either Thursday or Friday, so I'll give that one to you now. Georgia State is playing against Georgia Southern, and Georgia State is 6-1, and Georgia Southern 5-2, I believe, which is where I think it was Clay Helton went to, is over at Georgia Southern.
Yeah,
So Georgia State's going on the road. They're getting a couple points, and I definitely like the team that they have more than Georgia Southern's team. So I'm going to take those points. I'm going to buy it at 3.5 just in case. They did stall out last week after going up big, which is one of my picks last week with the plus points. But I'm also going to take Georgia State on the money line. And then another one that I have as a big dog this week is South Carolina. They're a team that I continue to try and piggyback off of because I know last year they started slow and Spencer Rattler got them going and they ended up 8-5, I believe, knocking off a couple big teams at the end who were making a push for the playoffs. South Carolina's playing against, I believe it's Texas A&M this week. They're 14.5 point underdogs. So I'm not going to take them to win it, but I could see them winning it. They haven't looked good. They're 2-5, so there's probably a reason for it. But I do think 2 scores is plenty enough to take against an A&M team that's been struggling offensively.
Yeah, I think that line is just so heavily weighed one way right now because South Carolina had such a rough week last week. I think they lost like 44-6 or something like that. It was not pretty whatsoever. It was against a decent team, I believe. So I do think that there is a good shot that they'll come back and be able to cover the 14.5, specifically because of the way that they've weighted last game on the lines this week. I think that's a good pick. A couple other picks that I really like, the BYU and Texas game. Obviously, BYU's first time in the division. Texas is on their way out. Like to buy a few points to BYU plus 20.5, but I do also like Texas to cover 10.5. Texas has been a game where sometimes they could just get going slowly, and in the second half they're able to turn it on. Their defense gets a big turnover for them and gets them ahead by a couple scores. So I do like them to win by 10.5, but I do like BYU to cover 20.5. So talk a little bit more about that one.
Yeah, after watching them get annihilated by TCU, I was like, okay, I'll stop betting BYU. But here we are. I saw a stat that in the last 5 matchups against Texas, BYU is 4-1, and then Texas is also without Quinn Ewers for the next 3 to 4 weeks.
True.
And so just based off that alone, I do like, it's a 17.5 point line, get an extra 3, take it at 20 or 20.5, and I do think BYU should cover. But after watching TCU, if Texas just runs the ball all game and dominates the line of scrimmage, I could see it getting out of hand. So I do think -10 for Texas, +20 for BYU should be a decent margin for whichever side you prefer in that game. Or if you don't like it, just don't touch it.
Yeah, if you
Um,
can get good money on both of those, I mean, there's a solid chance that both those picks hit. But if
mhm.
it doesn't, you have one way or the other, and you'll most likely end up hitting one. So I love that.
Yeah. And then another big line that I loved this week, I think you loved it as well, is Colorado's getting 17 at UCLA. And I
Yes.
know Colorado's ranked dead last, 130 out of 130 in football for yards per game allowed against their defense. And I don't think a team like UCLA, who's going to win the game on the ground, is going to be able to go up 3 scores on a Colorado offense that's as explosive as they are. I know UCLA is one of, I think, 10 teams in all of college football that hasn't allowed 100 points yet this season, or maybe they're at like 104. It might have been under 105. So their defense has
Mhm.
been good, but I do think that the Colorado offense with Shador, Travis Hunter, all those other guys that they have, they cover 17 easily. And honestly, I could see them possibly upsetting, but we'll see
Yeah,
what
this game
happens.
is for sure within 10. I think within 10 points. I
I do
think there
too.
could be
Yeah.
there could be a way in which late in the game UCLA ends up finding a way to go up 2 scores and win the game. But this is going to be a shootout. I don't think that UCLA's offense is good enough to necessarily throw the ball all over Colorado, even though their defense sucks like really bad. Um, I do think that they're just going to load the box and test their corners as much as they can. But UCLA is not going to be able to throw the ball, so it's going to be a close game. It's going to be a high scoring game, but I do think that Colorado is going to be able to definitely cover 17 and a half. So solid bet there.
Mhm. Yeah.
Next game that I really liked as well is Georgia and Florida. Georgia's
Mhm.
13 and a half point favorites going into Florida. They don't have Carson Beck this week. So I've been kind of flipping flopping back and forth. I think I'm going to buy it down a couple points to Georgia -10 and a half as well. I think that their defense is going to completely take over, and Florida is not going to have a shot on offense. But could be wrong. I do think that Georgia's just going to be able to find a way to overpower them with through the trenches. Their big guys are going to be able to tackle the other guys on the other side of the line. So I just think that Georgia's going to be able to cover, but I'm not confident in the 13 and a half. So I'll probably buy a few there.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't really know how I feel about that game. It's in the swamp, so which would make me lean Florida, but I'm not going to touch it. A couple more games that we liked. I know I like Oregon State on the money line. It's a 3-point line against Arizona. Is it Arizona? Arizona State. I think it's
Yep,
Arizona.
Arizona.
Yeah, so I'm going to take Oregon State on the money line. I would take a -2.5 also if you want to just buy it to 2.5. I think they'll win that game. I think they should dominate the line of scrimmage, and Damian Martinez should get going on the ground. And then Gould and a couple other guys should be good enough weapons for DJ to get the ball to. I know Arizona's got a high-powered offense, but they're coming against a good defense in Oregon State this year,
Yeah.
surprisingly. And so I think they're able to shut them down a little bit, and I do think Oregon State wins the game.
Yeah, I think that Oregon State's going to be able to run the ball in this game. So yeah, Oregon State
Yeah,
-3.5 against Arizona. Also,
makes
since
sense.
we're talking about Arizona, let's talk about Arizona State. They're playing Washington State.
Hmm.
Washington State just came into Eugene and had a bit of a rough week against the Ducks. Ducks look really good. I'm pretty happy that we had a nice bounce back week after that tough loss against Washington. Um, but Washington State, I expect them to bounce back. They're 6.5 point favorites against ASU away. ASU obviously played a pretty tough game against Washington up in Seattle last week, but I think that Washington State's offense is going to be able to throw the ball all over the place, and ASU's secondary is eventually not going to be able to keep up. So I expect them to cover 6.5.
Yeah, I like Washington State as well. I think 6.5 is a good line. I'm going to just stick with that. Take it for sure. Um, Cam Ward obviously looked great the first 4 weeks, not so much the last three. But Arizona State's 1-6, and they've looked good, but they keep finding ways to lose. So I'll just stick with Washington State. You can take a money line, better value obviously at the -6, 6.5.
Yeah, Cam
Uh,
Ward was still able to throw the ball all over Oregon. I think he had 400 yards plus through the air. So I don't doubt that he's going to be able to throw the ball against ASU. It's just a matter of if his receivers are going to be able to get to the end zone or not and make the big play.
mhm. Yeah, I get that. And then another one of the games I liked that I want to mention real quick is Coastal Carolina. They're usually a pretty good program. They started slow. They're starting to get hot again, and they're playing a Marshall team that has started to fall off. I think people realize that if they can stop Ali, I believe that's his name, the running back, their offense is pretty dull. So Coastal Carolina, I expect to actually go win that game, which I believe is at home against Marshall. Uh, so taking the 4.5, I think is a steal. Getting them at that, and then Oregon and Utah, I think was the last one that we wanted to talk about as well. So being a Duck, how do you feel about that one?
I love Oregon money line in this game. We've not been so hot against Utah, kind of similar to USC. Last few times we've played them, but I think our team this year is very comparable to Utah in terms of offensive defensive line. I think our offensive line is top 5 in college football, but I think our defensive line still needs improvement. So it's going to be about whether we can get to their quarterbacks. Obviously, they're not going to have Cam Rising in this game, so it's going to be interesting to see whether they play Johnson or Barnes against us. After such a good game against SC, I wouldn't see why they wouldn't play Barnes. But you never know. Kind of depends on the style I think they're looking for. But I think that Oregon will be able to win this game. It's going to be a tough game away, but in order to keep our college playoff hopes alive with one loss, we have to win out. So this is the first step in that. We have to play USC, Oregon State, and I think we have Cal and one other team left. But we got to win out, and this is just the start. So we got to win a big game away against Utah after they beat USC, and hopefully they're a little banged up.
Yep. Yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm going to take Oregon on the money line. Going into Salt Lake is going to be tough, but I mean, I don't think that Utah offense is all that great. Obviously, they just beat up on a USC defense, which is piss poor. Oregon's is a lot better, and like you said, first chance at the college football playoff, they got to win this. So I think they go out and they get it done. I do love Kyle Whittingham and what he's done over at Utah. He continues to surprise everyone, even without a quarterback. They're 6-1 and knocking people off. So I'm not going to touch the game, I don't think, but I'm definitely leaning on the Oregon money line.
Yeah, I think
And
it's like
then,
minus 270 or 170, and I don't like that number at all. So
yeah,
personally,
I
I
just
would
don't think
stay
it's
away.
worth it.
But I do think that Oregon's going to win the game. I think that we're going to find a way to get the season back on track after that tough loss to Washington, where we should have sent it to overtime or at least won the game. There is one more game though in college that I do like that before we move on. That is Tennessee and Kentucky. That's at home for Kentucky. I think that's going to be another game that's a battle of the trenches. Two teams that love to run the ball. I expect Tennessee to kind of come out on top in the end. So I am going to touch that on Tennessee money line. I think that's at minus 185 right now. So not the greatest number either. If you can get that down a little bit before the game starts, I do like that a little bit more. But yeah, I do think that's going to be a heavy game of offensive, defensive line, a lot of running the ball, and it's going to be a fun one to watch if you enjoy watching running backs go for 250. So
yeah, I like that. Two good running backs, Ray Davis, Jabari Small, and Jalen Wright. Or no, sorry. Yeah. But yeah, that should be a fun game. I did want to talk about a couple other things for college. So just to get your thoughts on it, which undefeated teams right now do you think are going to make a chance or are going to have a chance to make that top 4? And which ones do you think are frauds just out of Oklahoma, Georgia, Ohio State, Florida State, even one loss, Texas, Alabama? Who do you like? Who do you not like in that squad?
yeah, so I think Florida State and Oklahoma are kind of obviously the standouts to be potential frauds just because of the divisions they play in the conferences they play in. They just don't have as tough a schedule as the Pac. I mean, the Pac-12 this year is just absolutely loaded. So even the Pac-12 is tough. But the SEC, the Big 12, those teams are going to be, I think, a lot more fit defensively coming into that, like a game with a Florida State or an Oklahoma. So I do like the Georgias and the Penn States, even with one loss, Ohio State, Michigan, Ohio State both look really strong on both sides of the ball. So I do think that those Big 12 and SEC teams are going to be more fit for the playoff. But I do think if a Pac-12 team can squeak in there, that with the offenses we have in the Pac-12 with Washington, Oregon, USC, like if one of us can, well, USC not now with 2 losses, but if someone can find a way in there, I think that they could give a Georgia or a Michigan more trouble than a Florida State. So we'll see kind of how that all plays out. I do think that Florida State will have to lose a game in the ACC championship game or before that, and the same with Oklahoma since they just knocked off a pretty good Texas team. So that's kind of what I'm thinking.
Nice, I like it. With Texas having lost Quinn Ewers, I think their chances are done with one loss. I do think Oklahoma is going to lose one of these next 4. I think they have BYU, Texas Tech, Kansas, this week. I think Kansas has a good chance to win. But if not, I do think Oklahoma loses one. Florida State, their schedule's easy, so I can't see them losing
Yes.
one. I know they have to go into the swamp against Florida, which might be tough. Um, but I do see them possibly making it out undefeated. However, if they get to the championship game, they're going to have to play basically the winner of most likely this Duke Louisville game that we have this weekend. I think it's going to be a battle. Not sure again if Riley Leonard's playing. Um, but if he is, obviously, I think going into Louisville is going to be tough. Obviously, Jack Harlow there,
Yeah.
and everybody's on the Louisville bandwagon right now. But one of those teams I do think has a chance to knock off Florida State if they go undefeated. So I'm not
Hmm.
buying into that. I think USC comes out and gets revenge on Washington. I mean, the Pac-12 always beats up on each other. We've continued to say
Very
it.
true.
I talked about it with Oregon and Washington playing each other. Washington beat Oregon. Oregon will beat SC, and SC will beat Washington. It's just those triangles that the Pac-12 always make. But
And
Washington
SC
also
has
has
that game at home, so that's a big
yeah,
factor, I think, in that one. They have not played well away, so it'll be interesting to see them play at home.
yeah. So that'll be tough. Washington obviously has Washington State, Oregon State, I think, and Utah. Maybe it's a tough road for them to get to the end. So I don't think they'll make it. But one team I would say to keep an eye on for those top four spots, Alabama. And the odds for it right now for them to win it all is 14-1 plus 1400. And I'm personally sprinkling a little bit on that. The only trouble they should have in these final four games is going to be LSU coming after a bye. So and they lost to them last year, so I think it'll be a revenge game for Saban. They'll get a couple easy wins. Auburn might be tough at Auburn, but all it takes is getting those wins now, one at a time, and they'll make it to the SEC championship game, where they most likely will play Georgia, who doesn't look very good. And I tell you what, if that's the matchup, Saban's going to win it, and he's going to will his team into that top four. And if they can win one game, they're in the championship game at 14-1 odds. I love that. I also super long shot. Ole Miss is still one loss. They're 120-1 to make it. They play Georgia in 2 weeks, and I think that's the only real tough game that they have left this year. Obviously, they're in the same side as Alabama, and they lost to Alabama. So they would need Alabama to lose one to be able to make the SEC championship game, which is, I think, why the odds are so low. But if they can make it with one loss, uh, if Michigan and Ohio State happen to lose one along the way, or Florida State, Oklahoma all get knocked out, I do think they're going to have a chance to have their foot in the door with one loss over a team like Notre Dame, who might have two.
Yeah.
So I would definitely be on the lookout for Bama having a shot at plus 1400. And then Michigan's the new favorites to win it all. And it seems like they're just trying to tear that program apart with Harbaugh getting suspended a few games to start the year. And now everything about sign stealing as if every single team doesn't do it. I mean, you're taught
Yeah.
in high school, college, pros, you go scout other teams. So it seems like they're just reaching for it. But yeah, with that, I think we're getting ready to move into the NFL. Um,
Yeah.
and so we had another pretty good week last week. The Ravens was a big game. We both liked the Ravens, and they went out and absolutely dominated. So
Browns
just on
money
that,
line.
yeah,
That was a
Browns
good
money
one.
line looks good.
So there were a few
Yeah,
of those that were solid.
it was a good football week. I mean, Pats upset. That was beautiful. Vikings upset. That was fun to watch.
Eagles took down the
But
Dolphins.
Eagles took down the Dolphins fairly dominant fashion.
Hmm.
And on that note, I will say Howie Roseman did it again. He went and got Kevin Byard from the Titans, added a safety to fill in that role from the Chauncey Gardner-Johnson leaving.
Hmm.
That secondary already was the weak point of the team, but they have the players that have the caliber to be great. Now they got the safety depth and a good player in Byard. And trust me, Howie's not done making moves. He's going to make more before the deadline, which
Yeah.
I think it's Halloween is the deadline in a couple weeks, and that team's going to be rolling come playoff time. One thing I did want to talk about after the Vikings won that game, they're now 3-4 at the Packers this week.
And they've beat a
I'm
couple
ham-
good teams.
They
Yeah.
beat a couple of good teams. The Bears obviously not a good team, but the Niners, that was a big win, and getting them back to 3-4 with Jefferson, a couple wins in a row with Jefferson not there at the Packers. I'm hammering the Vikings this week. I don't love it, the line opened up at +3 for the Vikings. Hammered that. It's all the way down to even now. I'm still taking it. I'm throwing a lot at that. But on that note, I wanted to get your thoughts on this real quick. The Vikings to win the division are +550 right now.
Yeah, and
And the
that
Lions
division's
went
been really weak. The Lions had a really tough week last week against the Ravens, where they got their butts
the
kicked.
Bears and Packers are already out. It's just the Lions were -900 down to -550. Vikings are +550, and I'm going to sprinkle something on that because when I look at the Vikings remaining schedule, they can still get to 10 or 11 wins. Like
Yeah,
let me look this up real quick
I
and
think we
get
had them at 9 or 10 before the season starts, and we even thought that they would lose the first couple games. So
yeah.
yeah, I mean,
But
it's very
listen to
they
the
could go on a run.
schedule. Listen to the schedule the rest of the way. They're 3-4. They have the Packers, okay team. Falcons, okay team. Saints, okay team. Broncos, eh. Bears, eh. Raiders, eh. At the Bengals would be tough. The Lions is going to be for the division, so they'll need that win. And then they have the Packers and the Lions again.
Yeah, so I mean, they pretty much play their entire division plus a few teams in the NFC South.
It's going to be if they can beat the Lions both times,
Yeah,
I
wow.
think they win the division. If they win one, it's going to be tough. But I do think
Hmm.
they go 7-3 and pull off a 10-7 to end the year with that schedule that we just read off. I would expect possible Falcons, Bengals, Lions losses, but the rest of the way looks like pretty easy dubs. So I do think they're going to have a shot. Kirk's obviously the man, and it's fun to watch him where he's at because he doesn't care what anyone says or what anyone thinks. He just goes out there and balls, and
Yep.
he's been doing it. I did want to ask you, what do you think of the Dolphins and Lions? Both having pretty big losses.
Hmm.
Both teams, 5-2, were considered top five. A lot of people were talking about the Lions as the best team in football up until this last week. Uh, are they able to compete with the good teams? Because the Dolphins in their 5 wins, the record of those 5 teams is 8-25. The Lions, however, in their 5 wins, the record's 15-17. Without the Chiefs, though, that's down to just 9-16.
Okay.
So, what are your thoughts on those two teams?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is both these teams obviously I think are going to make the playoffs, but the biggest thing is the Lions are in the NFC and the Dolphins are in the AFC. The AFC
Mm-hmm.
is stacked. I mean,
Yep.
you pretty much, no matter where you go, you're going to have a tough game in the playoffs, even if it's the first
Mm-hmm.
round. But the NFC, there is a shot that you have a team that's not as good, that you have that you are better than. And I think that
Yeah.
the Lions may have a better chance at getting that better first series or better first game for them moving into whatever their conference playoff is, or the Western NFC Championship or whatever. I just think that the
Mm-hmm.
road for the Lions looks a little bit easier through the NFC than the AFC for the Dolphins, having to go through the Ravens and go through the Chiefs. Some of those all-star AFC teams that if you draw those teams first round, it's just kiss it goodbye. If you
Mm-hmm.
win, then you're really setting yourself up. But it's just not an easy road for the Dolphins, especially in that
Yep.
division too.
Yeah. I mean, they still got the advantage right now, but the Jets have the Giants with a chance to get to 4 wins. The Bills, 4 wins, and obviously just had a big loss to the Pats. And now the
Mm-hmm.
Pats go and play the Dolphins again. So we'll see how that ends up going. But I do think the Dolphins are a good team. Um, but yeah, they got to figure out how to beat good teams. I mean, they
Yeah.
didn't last year. They haven't beat a team with a 500 record since week 3 of last year. So I thought that was an
Wow.
interesting stat to see. The Lions are a more well rounded team with a fairly easy schedule, but I don't know if they can keep up with the big dogs as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but anyway, yeah, just want to pick your brain about that.
Yeah.
Obviously, the MVP discussion is also heating up. We had Lamarvelous doing what
Yep.
Lamar does, looking like the MVP candidate I talked about week 1 on the show. The reason I have the Ravens winning it all, Mahomes is doing Mahomes things. They're 6-1, and I still don't like them, but they're 6-1, and they're
Yeah.
the champs. Tua has been great, and obviously, if you're talking about Tua, you got to talk about Tyreek. Puka Nakua, 800 yards almost in his first
Yeah.
7 games. The Rams have a chance to bounce back to 500 this week in Dallas, and Hopefully that won't happen because I'll be there. Let's go Cowboys. And Myles Garrett or TJ Watt. Both their
Yeah,
teams 4-2, fighting for that division, and obviously Defensive Player of the Year is going to go to most likely one of those two. Um, yeah, it's been a fun season already, and we're 7 weeks in, and for this week we got a lot of plays for you. So I'm just going to rattle them off of the kind of the games that I'm looking at this week. I'll let you guys make your decision, and then Jake, I'll let you talk about what your thoughts are for each of them or whichever ones stand out to you.
for
But
sure.
this week I got the Bills money line against the Pats. If I'm going to pick points, I'm probably going to lean Pats plus 10. I got the Rams plus 7.5 at the Cowboys. I
Don't the
think it's going to
Bills
be a
play the
good game.
Bucks?
Oh yeah, sorry, Bills versus the Bucks. Yep.
Okay.
But yeah, the Bucks defenses look pretty solid. The Bills have been looking shaky, so I got it plus 10.5 for the Bucks. If I were leaning on something, I might just not touch the game. The Rams, yes, plus 7.5. I feel like it's a good matchup every time they play the Cowboys. Our secondaries look piss poor, and their offense has Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, who I expect to possibly both go for 100 yards. So maybe look at that as a player prop. I got the Jets money line. It's a home game, even though it's technically home for the Giants. They play the same stadium. And I think Robert Saleh has them coming out ready to play to get over 500 after the bye week. Like I said before, Vikings plus 3, hammered it. Money line, hammered it. Saints are at the Colts this week. Colts obviously coming off a loss that probably shouldn't have been a loss. They got screwed over by the refs a little bit. I'm
Yeah.
not going to talk about that, but going to take the Saints up to 3.5 and take it plus 3.5. Getting plus money as well. I'm going to drop a little bit on the money line. Like the Ravens this week against the Cards. 8.5 is kind of a weird line for me to look at, so I'm going to take it down to 6.5. Still take 6.5. I do think the Ravens mop the floor with the Cardinals. The Cardinals aren't very good. And then we got the Lions are playing Monday Night Football, I believe it is, against the Raiders, who look terrible. So I'm just going to
Yeah.
stick with the Lions money line. I don't love the 8 points because the Raiders have the potential to be good, but they haven't showed it. I got the Jags money line against the Steelers. This game is terrible. I said it last week. I'm not touching the Steelers because I can't figure them out. The teams that they should beat, they lose to. The teams that they should lose to, they beat every week.
Yep.
So I'm leaning Jags. Might not touch it. Your
Jags
call,
are a wagon right now.
dude. They're 5-2. They're looking hot, and Steelers are 4-2. Tomlining their way to a good record.
Yeah, exactly.
as
Good
we as
coach.
we as we figured. I got the Seahawks money line. I don't love it. The Browns look good. Their defense looks phenomenal. It's in Seattle. That's the only reason I'm leaning on it. Not sure if Metcalf's going to play, so we'll see what happens there. I got the Broncos plus 10 at the Chiefs. Yeah, or sorry, it's at home against the Chiefs. But yeah, I mean the Broncos are starting to look like a football team. Obviously not great, but they're good, and they just lost by 11 in Arrowhead a couple weeks ago to the same team. So I think they cover the 10 this week. I got the 49ers bouncing back. I think the Niners are in a state where they have a little bit of linebacker issues with health, and that's obviously where the Cowboys have been at. So their defense doesn't look as solid. I think that gets fixed against the Bengals offensive line that hasn't looked great, even though they've put a lot of money into it. Uh, Bengals are coming off a bye, so I think it could be a good game. I think they could cover 6. I do think the Niners are going to pull off the win there. And then finally, I was just going to say I got the Chargers minus 6.5. Everyone's saying, "Oh, the Bears are back." Tyson Bagent looked good. He looked like a good quarterback in his first start. He's 1-0, and that's the same amount of wins Justin Fields has in the last 15 games. But I got the Chargers minus 6.5. I think they're finally going to have a breakout on offense. The Bears defense sucks. Kellen Moore looks terrible. Praise God that the Cowboys got rid of him.
Yeah.
But I think they finally get it figured out against a poor Bears team, and the Chargers team finally gets going. So, what are your thoughts on some of those games?
Yeah, a lot of the picks I like. Bills money line against the Bucks makes a lot of sense. Falcons money line against the Titans. I think I'm not sure if you mentioned that one, but I like that.
I
Falcons,
didn't know.
Falcons in that one. Jags money line makes a lot of sense. Rams plus 7.5 against the Cowboys. Cowboys haven't really. They've been dominant in their first couple of games, but since then it's been pretty rocky road. So I do like the Rams to keep that, make that a game. Vikings money line, I did take it at plus 3.5. I bought it plus 3.5 to minus 150. I'm sure that number's changed now, so you might not be able to get as good a number, but I still think the Vikings are going to be able to win that game in Lambeau. Pats and Dolphins, I bought the Dolphins to minus 9.5 at minus 120. Saints and Colts, I am not touching. I think that game is a stay away. I do think the Colts are going to somehow win that game, but I think it's going to be within 3 points. So, if anything, I'd probably take Saints plus 3.5, but I do think the Colts may win that one at home. Jets and Giants, obviously both those teams play at the stadium. I'm leaning Giants plus 3.5. I think it's just going to be a super defensive game like the last Giants game against the Bills where it was like 17-14, something like that. I do think the Jets will probably end up winning, but I think that it's not going to be by anything more than a field goal. So plus 3.5 should be safe. I like the Eagles' money line against the Commanders. The Eagles had a really solid week against the Miami Dolphins last week, and they're just going to keep that wagon rolling after that loss a couple of weeks ago. And then Ravens, obviously a lock against the Cardinals. I like buying it down to minus 6.5 at minus 155. That makes a lot of sense. Niners money line, they have to bounce back. But I did hear today that there is a potential of no Purdy. So if Sam Darnold plays, that may
He's
be
out. Purdy's
okay.
out. It's Darnold.
Yeah. So that may be a little bit of a tougher game for them, trying to get used to Darnold in the first half. But I do think in the second half, their defense is going to keep them in the game in the first half to where they'll be able to figure it out. And Darnold will be able to get some completions and they'll end up pulling out the game, especially at home. And then Chiefs versus Broncos, obviously that's a tough one. I do think the Chiefs are going to cover 6.5. I bought that at minus 160. I do think that the Chiefs are just the better team and they're going to win by a touchdown. They've got the Taylor Swift momentum rolling with them, and they're just pretty much wiping out pretty much everybody. Travis Kelce's getting 14 catches a game for 150 yards, and it's an absolute maniac. So who's going to stop him, especially now with getting McCole Hardman back? That team is going to be back to the explosiveness that I think they were last year. And then Bears and Chargers, I'm not touching the line on that game, but I do love the over 46. I think, like you said, the Chargers are going to have a breakout game. Kellen Moore is going to get that offense going. It's going to be a super high-scoring game. I'm looking like 41-17, 38-17, something along those lines. So I love over 46 at minus 120. And that's what I like for NFL.
Nice. I was going to mention real quick about that Titans-Falcons game. I didn't end up touching it because I was leaning Titans. I thought that they were going to win. I was going to take them. And then they ruled out Ryan Tannehill. Will Levis is going to get his first career start, which makes me immediately be like, I'm going to take the Falcons. I'm still not touching it. I don't trust going against Vrabel and a 2-4 team. I am still leaning on the Falcons, so if you're going to go one way, I'd probably do that. But I personally wouldn't touch it. It is interesting with the Titans coming out saying everybody on the roster is up for grabs. Come make a trade offer, including Derrick Henry and D-Hop, considering they just got D-Hop. That was interesting.
And the Broncos did that with their entire wide receiving core today.
Yeah.
So
Judy's on. Yeah, Judy. Everyone's talking about
Sutton.
I didn't hear that about Sutton, but that's interesting as well. Marvin Mims has looked solid for them so far as a rookie. But yeah, anyway, I won't be touching that game. There were two things I wanted to touch on. After last week, the Ravens' value for Super Bowl went from 22-1 to 12-1. 12-1 is still very good odds. Take it while you can. It might fluctuate a little bit if they get a loss here or there, or even if the Bengals win a few and they lose one more and they get dropped in their division a little bit. 12-1 is good odds right now. I'd hammer it because I still believe in the Ravens. I think they're going to get there. I've been saying it from the start. And then the Jags to win their division is only minus 200. So you throw 100, you win 50. I don't know who else it's going to be. The Titans obviously don't want it. The Texans are 500. We'll see if they can keep it up this week. I did want to touch on that game. I missed that game.
Yeah, Texans-Panthers.
Panthers are going to go get their first one of the year, I think.
Oh, I think that C.J. Stroud is gonna throw the ball all over the Panthers defense. So maybe we can play opposite sides on that one. I'll take the Texans minus 2.5, and you can take the Panthers.
You take them 2.5. I'll take them plus 3.5. I'm also going to take them on the money line. Let's go Panthers.
Right on.
I think they're going to go get their first win. It's Bryce Young versus CJ. That's what we're waiting for. I think that's what everyone's been waiting for. So I'm excited for that one. But yeah, Texans, Colts are both kind of like in the in-between stages of where they're at. Titans suck. So minus 200 for the Jags to win the division, I think, is a beauty.
Yeah.
I would hammer that real quick as well. But on that note, I think we're done with the NFL. NBA season has started. If you didn't watch the last video,
let's go.
If you didn't watch the last video, go check it out. We broke down the whole season, kind of what our expectations are going to be. ready for it to go. Got started hot yesterday. Had the Suns, had the Nugs, had Jokic 20, 10, and 8, all of it smacked. Uh, I made an Instagram, posted my picks on there because I know we didn't have this out yet. And tonight's games, we went 7 for 7 on them. Go check it out. Lenny Locks on Instagram. And with that note, I'm going to give you some plays for NBA for the rest of the week. Get it out there, get it to you early, and let's make some money this weekend. So, my favorite play of the NBA season every year, Bucks versus Sixers tomorrow night. Same game parlay. Giannis over 24 points. Embiid over 24 points. Giannis over 10 rebounds. Embiid over 10 rebounds. Giannis over 1 block. Embiid over 1 block. And add the Bucks money line because they're not going to lose at home against a hardened-less Sixers team that pays about 14-1. That's my favorite play. I take it every time. I don't usually include the money line, but I think the Bucks will win, so I threw that in there. But it's about a 10-1 play with just Giannis and Embiid over 24 points, 10 rebounds, 1 block each. I love it every time they play. It's always a battle. I am a little worried about Giannis this year with Dame being there. I do think he's still going to drop 30 points, so I think 24 is the safe play on that all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
Embiid's usually scary for 10 rebounds because some games he'll grab 4 and some games he'll grab 18. He's lazy, but I think he comes to play when it's against Giannis. So I like that 24-10, and they both get a block, showing off their defensive side. And that leads me to Thursday, or that is Thursday. That leads me to Friday. And Friday, the 2 games that I like are the Celtics at home against the Heat. Celtics team obviously just got better with Drew. Kristaps Porzingis, they had a tough game against the Knicks today, but they pulled it off. The Heat barely pulled it off against the Pistons. I think those are 2 different level of teams, and I think the Celtics get their revenge for getting knocked out of playoffs last year at home. The Magic, I wrote them tonight. I've been talking about them. I'm probably going to keep talking about them, so you might get tired of hearing me. But the Magic are going to go on the road to play in Portland, and I think they're going to beat the Blazers. So those are my 2 teams. I'd take them singles. If you want to parlay it, parlay it. But the Celtics against the Heat, the Magic against the Blazers Friday night. Saturday, there's only 2 more games that day that I really liked, and it's the Pelicans at home against the Knicks. I do like the Pelicans at home. It's the start of the season, so Zion should be healthy. I liked him today against the Grizzlies, and they pulled it off by 7. And that was in Memphis. So being home, I think they're going to take on a tough Knicks team, who I do expect a lot out of this year. I also expect them to get Karl Anthony Towns throughout the season. So be on the lookout for that for the Knicks. But I like the Pelicans at home Saturday. And then I got the Grizzlies away against the Wizards. You'll probably notice a trend. I bet against the Wizards almost all year. I think they're terrible. Kuzma is, a good player. Jordan Poole's a good player, and they can get buckets, but they don't win. I also
they're not
like
team guys.
Yeah, I like Tyus Jones. They added him as well, and I liked a couple other draft picks. But I don't think the Wizards are going to know how to win games, or I don't think they're going to care about winning games. So I'm going to go against them a lot, especially from a good team like the Grizzlies. So Saturday I got the Pelicans and the Grizzlies, and then Sunday a couple more good games. The Bucks are playing the Hawks, which is always a battle. It's usually high scoring, so maybe look for the over in that game. I do like the Bucks though. They're at home. They don't usually lose at home. They're a good team. Sixers are at home against the Blazers. The Blazers are in the same position, I think, as the Wizards. However, they have a lot more talent, so I do look for them to win that one. And then the Clippers at home against the Spurs to start off their year. The Spurs have a tough matchup against the Mavs going on right now. I'm not exactly sure what the score is. But then Sunday, I'd be looking for that. The Bucks, Sixers, Clippers, all good playoff teams playing not so good teams in the Blazers, Spurs, and Hawks. So look for those. And then on Monday, there's a bigger slate that I liked a lot. The Thunder are at home. They're a pretty good team at home. They're a pretty good team in general. I do think the Thunder are going to start a little slower this year, but it's against the Pistons, who I think are still trying to figure it out. I'm just going to take them Thunder at home. Money line.
They had a nice win tonight.
Yeah, Thunder had a good win against the Bulls in Chicago. So I think after that, they get a couple days off. They should be able to win at home against the Pistons. The Pacers, just like the Magic, I'm going to be riding them all year. Had them again tonight. Smacked somebody. It might have been the Wizards. I don't even know.
I think it was, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, they put up like 140. Halliburton 11 assists, 20 points. Bruce Brown, the new
Just to
addition,
ease
got
your conscience a
22.
little, I know you got a big parlay going. The Kings did just pull off the victory by 16.
That is beautiful. The Kings won by 16. That means today, first parlay of the NBA season. We had the Pacers, which I said I'm riding them. That's my pick right here. Magic won. Cavs pulled it off. Thunder, my boys won. Kings took
Pelicans.
care of business. Kings took care
Pelicans.
of business. So
Yeah.
I had that 5-teamer and I put 25 on it. So that's good news. That means I just cashed $375. We will take it. That's a great
Yes,
start to the
sir.
year. NBA picks are going to be hot this year. I also posted on the Instagram Halliburton over 10 assists. He had 11. Alperen Sengun over 3.5 assists. He had 5 or 6. I think he had 6, 3 at halftime. So those are all bangers. Be looking for the plays on the Instagram. But yeah, to finish off Monday, I had those Thunder at home. I had the Pacers at home. I got the Bucks against the Heat. Again, usually a good game. The Bucks are too talented, and I think Dame goes off against the team he wanted to go to. And the Heat, the Pelicans against the Warriors should be a good one.
Yep.
Uh, I'm going to take the Pelicans at home just because they're at home. I think they match up well against each other. It should be a fun game. Probably a lot of points scored in that one, but I got the Pelicans. The Nuggets, I'm going to ride at home all year. They're always a good team at home. Had them
Yep.
last night against the Lakers, and I got them against the Jazz on Monday as well. And then I think the Lakers have a chance to lose against the Suns. I think it's on Friday, maybe tomorrow. But I think they'll bounce back at home against the Magic on Monday. So for Monday, again, it's the Thunder, Pacers, Bucks, Pelicans, Nuggets, Lakers. And that's going to do it for the NBA slate. I'll be posting them as the week goes on the Instagram. So keep up with me there. If you like, comment, subscribe, share it with your friends. The Instagram, the podcast. Let us know what you think. Hit me up if you're winning with me. Send me your picks. Send me your bet slips, and that'd make me excited to see that people are winning with us. So
Yeah.
on that note, I think we're going to call it a night, and we'll see you guys next time.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Peace.
Peace.
Perfect.